The massive space station floated above the gas giant like a metal moon. It was bigger than most cities on Earth. The Galactic Defense Academy stretched for miles in every direction. Its silver walls caught the light from 3 different suns that shone through the giant planet's rings. Inside the station, thousands of students from dozens of different worlds walked through the long hallways. Some had scales like lizards, others had 4 arms or blue skin. A few looked almost human but had strange eyes that glowed in the dark. They all came here for one reason. They wanted to become the best fighters in the galaxy. Sujin walked slowly through the main corridor. She kept her head down and her eyes on her datapad. The small device showed her homework for the day. She was studying to become an engineer. While other students learned how to fire weapons and pilot fighters, she learned how to fix broken engines and design better computer systems. She was 19 years old and very quiet. Most days she spoke to maybe 3 people. Her teachers knew her name because she always did her work on time. Other students barely noticed her at all. That was exactly how she liked it. The corridor around her was full of noise. Students from the warrior cultures were always loud. The Kaleth students hissed at each other in their own language. The Vrex students stamped their heavy feet when they walked. The Torgan students argued about everything in voices that sounded like grinding metal. But even with all that noise, Sujin could hear something else. From far away came the sound of training. Real training. The kind that made the whole station shake sometimes. Those sounds came from the dragon fighter halls. Everyone in the academy knew about the dragon fighters. They were human soldiers. The best human soldiers, maybe the best soldiers in the galaxy. They came from Earth to train at the academy before they went to fight in the big war. The war was against something called the hegemony. It was a group of alien races that wanted to control everything. They thought humans were too dangerous to be left alone. They thought Earth should be destroyed before humans could spread to more worlds. The dragon fighters were here to prove them wrong. Sujin had never met a dragon fighter. She ate in the civilian dining hall while they ate in their own special area. She lived in the quiet part of the station while they lived in the military section. Sometimes she saw them walking through the halls. They wore black uniforms with red dragon patches on their shoulders. They moved like they owned the station. Maybe they did. Other students stepped aside when dragon fighters walked by. Even the big warrior students from the aggressive species got quiet. Everyone knew the stories. Dragon fighters had won battles that should have been impossible. They had saved entire planets. They had made the hegemony afraid. The sound of their training echoed through the walls right now. Sujin could hear shouting in human voices. She could hear the clash of practice weapons. Sometimes the whole floor vibrated when something heavy hit the ground. She found it strange that the sounds made her feel safe. She was not a fighter. She had never held a weapon in her life. But knowing that Earth's best warriors were close by made her feel protected. Sujin turned down a side corridor that led to the library. This part of the station was much quieter. The walls here were painted in soft colors instead of military gray. Pictures of different worlds hung on the walls. It was meant to make civilian students feel comfortable. She liked it here because she could think. As she walked, she thought about her assignment for tomorrow. She had to design a new type of engine cooling system. It was the kind of work she enjoyed. Solving problems with math and engineering made sense to her. People were much harder to understand. The library was almost empty when she arrived. A few students from peaceful species sat at tables reading quietly. They nodded at her when she walked in. She nodded back. They understood each other. They were all here to learn, not to fight. Sujin found her favorite table in the back corner. It had a big window that looked out at the gas giant below. The planet was beautiful. Its clouds swirled in colors that changed from blue to purple to gold. Sometimes she forgot to study because she was watching the clouds move. She set down her data pad and pulled out her notebook. Real paper was expensive in space, but she liked to write things down by hand. It helped her think better. For the next hour, she worked on her engine design. The math was complicated, but she enjoyed the challenge. Slowly, the pieces came together in her mind. She could see how the new system would work. It would be more efficient than anything currently in use. The Distant sound of dragon fighter training continued the whole time. She had gotten so used to it that it was like background music. Shouted commands in Korean and English, the ring of metal on metal, the heavy breathing of people pushing themselves to their limits. She wondered what it would be like to be that strong, to be that confident. Dragon fighters walked through the station like they belonged anywhere they went. Nobody ever told them to move or questioned what they were doing. Sujin could not imagine feeling like that. She always felt like she was taking up too much space, like she should apologize for being there. A group of students walked past the library windows. They were Kaleth students. She recognized them by their green scales and the way they moved. Kaleth came from a world where only the strong survived. They brought that attitude with them everywhere they went. One of them looked through the window at her. His eyes were yellow and cold. He said something to his friends and they all looked. Then they laughed. Sujin felt her face get hot. She looked down at her notebook and tried to focus on her work. But she could feel them watching her for several more minutes before they finally moved on. This happened sometimes. Students from warrior cultures thought civilian students were weak. They liked to remind them of it. She tried to ignore it, but the feeling stayed with her. That cold look in the Kaleth student's eyes, like she was something small and unimportant. From far away, the dragon fighter training continued. The sounds reminded her that not all humans were quiet and small like her. Some humans were strong. Some humans made the galaxy take notice. She wished she could be like them. But wishing would not make it true. She was just Sujin, just an engineering student who wanted to be left alone. She went back to her work and tried not to think about yellow eyes watching her through windows. 3 days passed since Sujin saw the Kaleth students watching her through the library window. She tried to forget about it. She focused on her studies and stayed in the quiet parts of the station. But the feeling of being watched never went away. The Kaleth students were named Vex, Korth, and Zal. They came from a world called Kaleth Prime where the strong ruled over the weak. Their green scales were thick like armor. Their claws could cut through metal. Their yellow eyes could see in complete darkness. On their homeworld, they were important. Their families controlled large territories. Other Kaleth bowed to them and gave them whatever they wanted. But here at the academy, they were just students like everyone else. This made them angry. They especially did not like humans. Humans were small and soft. They had no scales or claws or natural weapons. But somehow humans had become the most feared fighters in the galaxy. This made no sense to the Kaleth students. The dragon fighters were one thing. Those humans were soldiers with training and weapons. But there were other humans at the academy too, civilian humans like Sujin who just studied normal subjects. The Kaleth students thought these humans should know their place. Vex was the leader of the three. He was bigger than most Kaleth, and his scales were darker green. His family owned 3 cities on Kaleth Prime. He was used to getting whatever he wanted. That small human in the library, he told his friends as they ate lunch in the warrior dining hall. She thinks she belongs here. Korth nodded. He was not as smart as Vex, but he was meaner. His claws were longer than normal and he kept them very sharp. All the soft humans think they are special because of the dragon fighters. Zal was the youngest of the 3. He wanted the other 2 to think he was tough. We should teach her what happens to weak creatures who forget their place. Vex smiled. It was not a nice smile. Yes, but we must be careful. The dragon fighters protect their own kind. Only if they know something happened, Korth said. If no one sees anything, who can prove what we did? They began to plan. For 2 days they watched Sujin. They learned her schedule. She went to classes in the morning. She ate lunch alone in the civilian dining hall. She spent afternoons in the library. She walked the same paths every day. The best place would be the bathroom near the civilian quarters. It was far from the dragon fighter training areas. The walls were thick so no one could hear sounds from inside. Most importantly, humans usually went there alone. On the 3rd day, they followed her. Sujin finished her lunch and walked toward the library like always. But today felt different. She could not explain why, but something seemed wrong. The hallways felt too quiet. Other students seemed to avoid looking at her. She told herself she was just being nervous. Her big engineering exam was tomorrow. She always felt worried before tests. But when she turned down the corridor toward the bathroom, she heard footsteps behind her. Not the normal sound of students walking to class. These footsteps were trying to be quiet. She looked over her shoulder and saw them. 3 Kaleth students walking about 20 feet behind her. The big one with the dark scales was smiling. Her heart started beating faster. Maybe they were just going the same direction. Maybe it was nothing. She reached the bathroom and went inside. The room had 6 stalls and a row of sinks with mirrors. Bright lights made everything look very clean and white. She set her datapad on the counter and tried to calm down. But when she turned to leave, they were there. All 3 of them stood between her and the door. Vex was in the middle. Korth and Zal spread out to block any escape path. "Hello, little human," Vex said. His voice was like gravel scraping on metal. "We wanted to talk to you." Sujin backed against the wall. Her datapad was still on the counter, but she could not reach it without getting closer to them. "I have not done anything wrong," Korth laughed. The sound echoed off the white tiles. "You exist, that is wrong enough." Zal moved to her left side. "Your kind thinks you own the galaxy. You think you are better than everyone else." "That is not true," Sujin said quietly. "I just want to study and be left alone." "But you cannot be left alone," Vex said. He took a step closer. "Because you are human, and humans are a problem that needs to be solved." The bathroom felt like it was getting smaller. The bright lights seemed too bright. Sujin could smell the Kaleth students now. They smelled like leather and something sharp that hurt her nose. "Your dragon fighters are not here," Korth said. "No one will hear you if you scream. No one will help you." From somewhere far away, Sujin could hear the sounds of training. Human voices shouting commands, the clash of practice weapons, the heavy footsteps of Earth's finest warriors. But they might as well have been on another planet. "Please," she whispered. "I have never hurt anyone. I just want to go back to my studies," Zal hissed. "Too late for that. You walked through our territory like you belonged there. You looked at us like we were nothing. Now you learn what happens to soft little humans who show disrespect." Vex reached toward her arm. His claws were long and sharp. They caught the light from the bathroom fixtures. "Time to teach your species a lesson," he said. But something strange happened then. As his claws got closer to her arm, Sujin felt something change inside her chest. The fear was still there, but it was mixing with something else. Something older and deeper. Her ancestors had faced much worse than 3 bullies in a bathroom. They had faced ice ages and wild animals and wars that lasted for years. They had faced the emptiness of space and made it their home. She was human. And humans did not give up easily. Vex's claws were almost touching her when she looked up at him. Her eyes were different now. Not scared, not weak, dangerous. "Touch me," she said quietly, "and find out what humans are really made of." The 3 Kaleth students stopped moving. Something in her voice made them uncertain. This was not the reaction they expected from prey. In the Dragon Fighter training hall, Captain Dong Hyuk stopped in the middle of his practice routine. He held his plasma sword steady, but his head was tilted like he was listening to something far away. Lieutenant Hai Wan noticed immediately. She had served under Captain Dong Hyuk for 3 years. She knew all his habits. When he stopped like this, it meant trouble. "Sir?" she asked quietly. "What is it?" "Kaleth voices," he said without moving. "Coming from the civilian sector." Sergeant Boram looked up from cleaning his rifle. His face was covered in scars from the Battle of Proxima 7. He had learned to trust the captain's instincts about danger. "How many?" Boram asked. 3, maybe 4. Captain Dong Hyuk set down his practice sword and walked toward the door. "They sound aggressive." All dragon fighters had enhanced hearing. It was part of their training. They learned to pick out important sounds from background noise. Right now, the captain could hear Kaleth students speaking in their harsh language somewhere in the civilian areas. Kaleth students usually stayed in the warrior sections of the academy. When they went to civilian areas, it was never for good reasons. Should we investigate? Lieutenant Haiwan asked. Captain Dong Hyuk was quiet for a moment. He was thinking about regulations. Dragon fighters were not supposed to interfere in student disputes unless someone was in serious danger. But Kaleth students did not go to civilian areas just to talk. Get your gear, he said finally. But stay quiet. We watch first. The three dragon fighters moved through the station like shadows. Other students stepped aside without thinking about it. Everyone knew not to get in the way of dragon fighters on a mission. They reached the civilian sector quickly. The hallways here were painted in soft colors and decorated with peaceful artwork. It was meant to help non-warrior students feel comfortable. Captain Dong Hyuk held up his hand. They all stopped and listened. The Kaleth voices were closer now, coming from the direction of the bathroom facilities. 3 of them, he whispered, to his team. Adult males. They sound excited about something. Lieutenant Haiwan drew her sidearm but kept it low. Hunting? Probably. Sergeant Boram checked his rifle one more time. Target? Before Captain Dong Hyuk could answer, they heard something that made all 3 fighters freeze. A human voice. Young. Female. Speaking very quietly but with an edge that every dragon fighter recognized. It was the voice of a human who had been pushed too far. Oh, Lieutenant Haiwan said softly. Those poor stupid lizards, Sergeant Boram added. Captain Dong Hyuk smiled grimly. Double time. But not to save the girl. Sir? Lieutenant Haiwan looked confused. To save the Kaleth. Before they learn something they are not ready for. Meanwhile, in the bathroom, Sujin stared at the 3 aliens who had cornered her. Something was happening inside her mind. Memories she had never experienced were suddenly very clear. She could see her ancestors hunting mammoth across frozen plains. She could feel them crossing oceans in wooden ships that should not have survived the journey. She could sense them looking up at the stars and deciding those distant lights would someday belong to humanity. Humans were not the biggest species in the galaxy. They were not the fastest or the strongest. But they had something else. Something that had carried them from caves to starships. They never gave up. Vex reached for her arm again. His claws were sharp enough to cut through steel. On Kaleth Prime, no one would dare resist when he decided to hurt them. But Sujin was not from Kaleth Prime. Her hand shot out faster than any of them expected. Her fingers aimed straight for Vex's eyes. Kaleth had thick scales that could stop most attacks. But their eyes were soft and vulnerable, and humans had been targeting weak spots since they first picked up sharpened sticks. Vex screamed and stumbled backward. Green blood ran down his scaled cheeks. One eye was completely closed. The other was watering so much he could barely see. Korth roared and lunged forward. He expected easy prey. He expected a weak human who would fall down and beg for mercy. Instead, Sujin dropped low and drove her shoulder into his center of mass. Humans were built for persistence hunting. Their bodies were designed to keep moving no matter how tired or hurt they got. Korth hit the bathroom wall hard enough to crack the tiles. He slid to the floor and struggled to breathe. Zal circled her, carefully now. This was not what they had planned. This small, quiet human was supposed to be helpless. What are you? He whispered. Sujin straightened up. Her engineering uniform was torn, and she had Kaleth blood on her knuckles. But her voice was steady when she answered. I am human. We are the species that looked at a world full of creatures bigger and stronger than us, and decided we would rule it anyway. We are the species that saw the black emptiness between stars and called it our new home. She took a step toward Zael. He backed away. We are the species that other species have nightmares about, and you just reminded me why. Outside, the bathroom door, Captain Dong Hyuk and his team heard the sounds of fighting. But they were not the sounds they expected. Instead of human screams, they heard Kaleth voices crying out in pain and fear. Should we go in now? Lieutenant Haiwan asked. Captain Dong Hyuk listened for a few more seconds. The bathroom had gone quiet except for some heavy breathing and what sounded like whimpering. I think, he said slowly, the situation is under control. Inside the bathroom, Sujin looked at the three Kaleth students. Vex was holding his damaged eyes and making soft crying sounds. Korth was still trying to catch his breath. Zal was pressed against the far wall like he wanted to disappear. She walked to the counter and picked up her datapad. It was not damaged. She checked her reflection in the mirror. Her hair was messy and her uniform was torn, but she was not seriously hurt. "The next time you think about cornering someone," she said without looking at them, "remember that humans did not become the most feared species in the galaxy by being weak." She walked toward the door. All three Kaleth moved aside to let her pass. "We came from a world that tried to kill us every single day. We turned it into our garden. We looked at space and made it our ocean. And we looked at species like you and decided you would learn to respect us." She paused at the door. "Today you learned." Then she walked out, leaving three of the Academy's biggest bullies huddled in a bathroom, finally understanding why the galaxy feared humanity, and why they should have left the quiet engineering student alone. The bathroom door slid open just as Sujin reached for the handle. Captain Dong Hyuk stood in the doorway with Lieutenant Haiwan and Sergeant Boram behind him. All three dragon fighters were armed and ready for combat. But they stopped when they saw the scene inside. Vex was on the floor holding his bleeding eyes. Korth sat against the wall trying to breathe normally. Zal stood in the corner looking like he wanted to become invisible. And in the middle of it all stood Sujin, calm and unbroken. Captain Dong Hyuk looked at the damaged Kaleth students. Then he looked at the small human engineering student. Then he looked at his team. "Stand down," he said quietly. "The threat has been neutralized." Lieutenant Haiwan stepped forward and offered Sujin a clean towel from her equipment pack. "You hurt?" Sujin shook her head and accepted the towel. She used it to wipe Kaleth blood from her knuckles. "Thank you, I am fine." Sergeant Boram walked over to examine the three aliens. His medical training told him they would all survive. His combat experience told him they had learned an important lesson. "What happened here?" Captain Dong Hyuk asked. "They cornered me," Sujin said. "Simply. They wanted to hurt me because I am human, because they thought I was weak." "And you showed them otherwise," Lieutenant Haiwan said. "It was not a question." "Yes." Captain Dong Hyuk activated his communicator. "Security to Civilian Bathroom 7. 3 Kaleth students need medical attention and disciplinary action." While they waited for security to arrive, Sergeant Boram knelt next to Vex. The Kaleth student was making soft whimpering sounds. "Eye damage," Boram reported. "Painful but not permanent. Classic human targeting of vulnerable areas." He moved to check Korth. "Breathing difficulties from blunt force trauma to the chest. No broken ribs, but he will be sore for weeks." Finally, he looked at Zal, who had not moved from the corner. "This one appears to be suffering from shock. Probably never encountered real human aggression before." Captain Dong Hyuk nodded. He had seen this reaction many times during the war. Alien species who thought they understood humans often had this same look after their first real encounter with human combat instincts. "You did good work here," he told Sujin. "Clean, efficient, proportional response. You stopped the threat without causing permanent damage." Sujin looked surprised. "I was just trying not to get hurt." "That is how humans fight," Lieutenant Haiwan said. "We do whatever we need to survive. Nothing more, nothing less." Security officers arrived a few minutes later. They were a mixed team of different species, all trained in Academy law enforcement. The team leader was a tall, gray-skinned Altarian named Commander Vel. "What is the situation?" Commander Vel asked. Captain Dong Hyuk gave a brief report. 3. Kaleth students had cornered a human civilian with the intent to cause harm. The human defended herself successfully. The Kaleth students required medical attention and would face disciplinary action for assault. Commander Vel looked at the scene and nodded. This was not the first time Kaleth students had tried to bully smaller species, but it was the first time one of their targets had fought back so effectively. "Miss," he said to Sujin, "will you file a formal complaint?" Sujin thought about it for a moment. "Will they be punished?" "Yes." Assault of civilian students is a serious crime here. They will probably be sent back to Calith Prime. Then yes, I will file the complaint. Medical teams arrived to treat the injured Calith students. As they worked, other students began to gather in the hallway outside. Word was spreading quickly through the academy. The quiet human girl had defeated 3 Calith warriors in single combat. By the time the medical teams finished, a crowd had formed. Students from dozens of different species watched as the injured Calith were carried away on stretchers. They saw Su-Jin walk out of the bathroom calm and mostly unharmed. The crowd was very quiet. Everyone was thinking the same thing. If a small, peaceful human could do this to 3 trained Calith warriors, what could the dragon fighters do? Captain Dong-hyuk noticed the crowd and made a decision. He stepped forward so everyone could see and hear him clearly. What you witnessed today, he announced, is not unusual. Every human carries within them the same instincts that built our civilization. The same drive that took us from caves to starships. The same determination that makes us feared across the galaxy. He looked around at the mixed group of alien students. Some were from warrior species, others were from peaceful worlds. All of them were staring at Su-Jin with new respect. This student is not a trained fighter, he continued. She is an engineer. She studies mathematics and engine design, but she is human, and humans do not break easily. Lieutenant Hai-Wan stepped up beside her captain. The Calith students made a mistake. They thought civilian humans were different from military humans. They thought some of us were weak. Sergeant Boram joined them. Today they learned the truth. There is no such thing as a weak human. There are only humans who have not yet been tested. The crowd began to disperse slowly. Students walked away in small groups, talking quietly among themselves. But they all looked at Su-Jin differently now. Not with fear exactly. With recognition. She was human. That meant she was dangerous. Commander. Fel finished taking Su-Jin's statement and handed her a copy for her records. The Calith students will face a disciplinary hearing tomorrow. Their families will be notified. They will most likely be expelled from the academy. Good, Captain Dong-hyuk said. Maybe word will get back to Calith Prime that human civilians are not easy targets. After the security team left, the 3 dragon fighters walked with Su-Jin toward the civilian quarters. Other students they passed moved aside respectfully. Not just for the dragon fighters, but for Su-Jin as well. How do you feel? Lieutenant Hai-Wan asked. Su-Jin thought about the question. Different, like something inside me woke up. That happens, Sergeant Boram said. Most humans go their whole lives without needing to fight, but when the moment comes, we remember what we are. What are we? Su-Jin asked. Captain Dong-hyuk stopped walking and looked at her seriously. We are the species that survived ice ages and world wars. We are the species that looked at the stars and decided they belonged to us. We are the species that never gives up, never surrenders, and never lets anyone push us around. He paused. We are the species that other species tell scary stories about. And today you reminded the galaxy why. They reached the civilian quarters and stopped outside Su-Jin's room. She hesitated before going inside. Captain, she said, earlier you mentioned that dragon fighters need good engineers. Did you mean that? Captain Dong-hyuk smiled. It was the first time she had seen him smile. Yes. We always need people who understand that the best weapons are not always the biggest ones. Sometimes the best weapon is a mind that refuses to quit. I think I would like to learn more about that, Su-Jin said. Report to Training Base 7 tomorrow at 800, Lieutenant Hai-Wan said. Bring your engineering books. We will show you how to apply them. Su-Jin nodded and went inside her room. As the door closed behind her, she looked at herself in the mirror. She looked the same as always, but something inside her had changed forever. She was still quiet. She still preferred books to people. But now she knew something important. She was human, and humans were never truly helpless. Outside in the hallway, Captain Dong-hyuk and his team began walking back to their quarters. Think she will make it through dragon fighter training? Sergeant Boram asked. Did you see what she did to 3 Kaleth warriors with no training at all? Lieutenant Haiwan replied. Captain Dong-hyuk nodded. She will do fine. The galaxy needs more humans who remember what they are capable of. And in the distance, carried on the station's ventilation system, came the sound of Kaleth students in the medical bay, still learning to fear the species from Earth. Word spread through the academy faster than fire through dry grass. By dinner time, every student knew the story. The quiet human girl had defeated 3 Kaleth warriors in single combat. Some of the details got bigger with each telling, but the basic facts remained the same. Humans were not to be underestimated. Any humans. In the warrior dining hall, students from aggressive species ate their meals in unusual silence. The Torgan students, who usually argued about everything, whispered quietly among themselves. The Vrex students, known for their loud stamping and roaring, moved carefully and kept their voices low. Everyone was thinking about the same thing. If a small civilian human could do that much damage, what could a trained dragon fighter do? The answer was something most of them preferred not to imagine. In the civilian dining hall, Sujin sat at her usual table in the corner, but tonight she was not alone. Other civilian students had asked to sit with her. They brought their food over and made polite conversation about classes and homework. They treated her differently now. Not with fear, but with respect. She was still the quiet engineering student who kept to herself, but now everyone knew she was also something else. She was human. A Jaren student named Kala sat across from her. The Jaren were a peaceful species with blue skin and large, gentle eyes. They came from a world where violence was almost unknown. I wanted to thank you, Kayla said quietly. For what? Sujin asked. For showing them that peaceful does not mean helpless. The warrior students have been getting worse lately. They think because we do not like to fight, we cannot fight. Other civilian students nodded in agreement. A Cillian named Oro leaned forward. His species looked like tall, thin humans with silver skin. The Kaleth students have been bothering many of us, he said, taking our food, pushing us around, making us move when they want our tables. We always just let them do it. Why? Sujin asked. Because we are here to learn, not to fight, Kayla explained. Fighting goes against everything we believe. But they were going to hurt you, another student said. What choice did you have? Sujin thought about the question. I had lots of choices. I could have tried to run. I could have begged them to stop. I could have just let them do whatever they wanted. So why did you fight? Because I am human, she said simply. And humans do not give up. At the dragon fighter table in the military section, Captain Dong-hyuk was having a similar conversation with his team. But their discussion was more technical. Clean targeting, Lieutenant Haiwan said. She went for the eyes first. Classic, human instinct to attack vulnerable areas. Good body mechanics on the shoulder charge too, Sergeant Boram added. Used her whole body weight. Aimed for center mass. Textbook technique for fighting larger opponents. Captain Dong-hyuk nodded. Most impressive was the psychological warfare. She made them afraid before the fighting even started. That speech about humans being the species others have nightmares about? That was pure intimidation. Think she has natural talent? Lieutenant Haiwan asked. All humans have natural talent. For combat, the captain replied. Most just never discover it. Today she discovered hers. The next morning, Sujin reported to Training Base 7 at exactly 0800. She brought her engineering textbooks like Lieutenant Haiwan had suggested. She also brought her datapad and a notebook for taking notes. She was not sure what to expect. Training Base 7 was huge. The ceiling was 3 stories high. The floor was covered with thick mats for practicing combat moves. Weapon racks lined the walls, filled with practice swords, rifles, and other equipment she did not recognize. Captain Dong-hyuk was waiting for her in the center of the bay. He wore his black dragon fighter uniform with the red dragon patch on the shoulder, but today he also wore a smile. Good morning, Sujin. Ready to learn? Yes, sir, she said. Then she hesitated. But I should tell you, I have never held a weapon before yesterday. I do not know anything about fighting. Yesterday you defeated 3 trained warriors with no weapons and no training, he pointed out. You know more than you think. Lieutenant. Hewan and Sergeant Borum entered the training bay carrying a box of equipment. They set it down next to Sujin and opened it. Inside were practice weapons, armor pieces, and several electronic devices she did not recognize. First lesson, Captain Dong Hyuk said. Human combat is not about being the biggest or strongest. It is about being the smartest and most determined. He picked up a practice sword from the box. It was made of lightweight metal and had a dull edge for safety. This weapon has been used by humans for thousands of years. But the real weapon is not the sword. It is the mind that wields it. He handed the sword to Sujin. She held it carefully, surprised by how balanced it felt in her hands. Engineering background? Lieutenant Hyewan asked. Yes, ma'am. Good. Fighting is just engineering applied to combat. You analyze the problem, find the weak points, and apply force efficiently. For the next hour, they taught her basic sword positions, how to hold the weapon properly, how to move her feet for balance, how to block incoming attacks. Sujin found it easier than she expected. The movements followed logical patterns. Each position had a purpose. Each technique solved a specific problem. You learn fast, Sergeant Boram observed. It makes sense, she said, like solving an equation. If the opponent does this, then I do that. Exactly, Captain Dong Hyuk said. Combat is problem-solving under pressure, and humans are very good at solving problems. They moved on to unarmed combat. The same techniques she had used instinctively the day before, but refined and improved through training. Yesterday you fought on instinct, Lieutenant Hyewan explained. That worked because you were fighting for survival, but with training, you can be even more effective. They showed her how to target weak points more precisely, how to use leverage to overcome larger opponents, how to turn an enemy's strength against them. By the end of the morning, Sujin was sweating and tired but excited. For the first time in her life, she felt truly capable of protecting herself. How do you feel? Captain Dong Hyuk asked as they cleaned up the equipment. Different, she said. Like I understand something I never understood before. What is that? Why? Other species are afraid of us. We are not just peaceful engineers and farmers. We are also predators. We just choose not to hunt most of the time. Captain Dong Hyuk smiled. Now you are beginning to understand what it means to be human. That afternoon, Sujin returned to her regular classes, but everything felt different. When she walked through the hallways, other students moved aside respectfully. Not just the peaceful species, but some of the warrior students too. The story of her fight with the Kaleth had spread to every corner of the academy. Each telling made her sound more dangerous than the last. In her engineering class, the professor asked her to present her engine cooling design to the other students. As she explained her work, she noticed something new in their faces. They were not just listening politely. They were paying attention, real attention, like they understood that anything a human designed might be more clever and dangerous than it appeared. Her design was good. But now they were wondering what else she might be capable of building. After class, a group of students from various species approached her. They were all from peaceful worlds like her. Would you teach us? Asked a Celian student named Vex. Not the same Vex who had tried to hurt her, but a different one. This Vex had silver skin and gentle eyes. Teach you what? How to fight back. How to stand up to the bullies. How to be strong like humans. Sujin thought about the request. She was still new to fighting herself. But she remembered what Captain Dong Hyuk had said about human combat being based on intelligence and determination, rather than strength. I can teach you what I learned, she said. But you have to understand something. Fighting is not about hurting people. It is about protecting yourself and others who cannot protect themselves. All the students nodded eagerly. And you have to promise me something else. You will only use these skills when you have no other choice. When someone tries to hurt you or hurt someone weaker than them. They promised. That evening, Sujin sat in her room looking out at the Yao gas giant below. Its clouds swirled in beautiful patterns of blue and gold. But she was not really watching the planet. She was thinking about the day. This morning she had been a quiet engineering student who just wanted to be left alone. Tonight she was something more. She was still an engineering student, she still wanted to study and learn. But now she was also a teacher, a protector, a human who remembered what her species was capable of. Tomorrow, she would return to dragon fighter training. She would learn more about combat and weapons and strategy, but she would also continue her engineering studies. Because the best human warriors were not just fighters, they were thinkers and builders too. And in her spare time, she would teach other peaceful students how to defend themselves, how to be strong without being cruel, how to stand up to bullies without becoming bullies themselves. She was still quiet. She still preferred books to crowds. But now she knew something important about herself. She was human, and humans took care of each other. Outside her window, the dragon fighter training halls echoed with the sounds of combat practice. But tonight, those sounds did not make her feel small and protected. They made her feel proud to belong to the same species as those warriors. 3 months passed since the incident in the bathroom. The Kaleth students had been sent back to their home world in shame. Word of their defeat spread through the warrior culture networks like wildfire. Soon, every aggressive species in the galaxy knew the story. A small, quiet human female had defeated 3 trained Kaleth warriors without weapons or armor. She had done it using nothing but intelligence, determination, and the ancient human instinct for survival. The story grew with each telling. Some versions said she had fought 10 Kaleth. Others claimed she had killed them all. The truth was impressive enough, but alien species preferred their cautionary tales to be dramatic. The message was always the same. Do not underestimate any human. Ever. At the Galactic Defense Academy, life had changed in subtle but important ways. The warrior students from aggressive species were more careful about who they bothered. The civilian students from peaceful worlds walked with more confidence, and everyone treated humans with a new level of respect. Sujin had become something of a legend herself. Students would point her out in the hallways and whisper to their friends, "That is her. That is the human who defeated the Kaleth." But she remained the same quiet person she had always been. She still studied engineering. She still preferred books to crowds. She still ate lunch alone most days. The only real difference was that now she spent 3 hours every morning in dragon fighter training. Captain Donghyuk had been right about her natural talent. She learned combat techniques as easily as she learned mathematical formulas. Her engineering mind broke down fighting into systems and patterns that made perfect sense. More importantly, she understood the philosophy behind human combat. It was not about being cruel or dominating others. It was about protecting what mattered and never giving up when faced with impossible odds. Lieutenant Haiwan had become her primary instructor. The female dragon fighter appreciated having another woman in the training program. Most human warriors were male, which sometimes made the other species think human females were weak. Sujin proved that assumption wrong every single day. "Your sword work is improving," Lieutenant Haiwan said as they finished morning practice. "But your real strength is still tactical thinking." Sujin nodded while wiping sweat from her face. "I like solving problems. Combat is just another type of engineering challenge." "Exactly. And that is what makes humans dangerous. Other species fight with instinct or training. We fight with our minds." Sergeant Boram approached them carrying a new piece of equipment. It was a small device that looked like a thick bracelet made of black metal. "What is that?" Sujin asked. "Combat analyzer," he explained. "It measures your reaction times, movement efficiency, and tactical decisions during training. We want to see how you compare to other dragon fighter candidates." Sujin put on the device and ran through a series of combat exercises. The analyzer recorded everything: her speed, her accuracy, her ability to adapt to changing situations. When she finished, Sergeant Boram looked at the results and whistled softly. "What does it say?" Lieutenant Haiwan asked. Her scores are in the top 10% of all dragon fighter candidates, and she has only been training for 3 months. Captain Dong Hyuk joined them to review the data. He studied the numbers carefully before speaking. "These are exceptional results," he said finally, "especially the tactical analysis scores. You solve combat problems faster than candidates who have been training for years." "Is that good?" Soo-jin asked. "It means you have a choice to make," Captain Dong Hyuk replied. "You could continue your engineering studies and become a civilian contractor for the military, or you could join the dragon fighters as a full combat operative." Soo-jin was quiet for a long moment. She had not expected this opportunity. 3 months ago, she was just a shy student who wanted to be left alone. Now she was being offered a chance to join the most elite fighting force in human space. "What would that mean?" she asked. "It would mean completing full dragon fighter training, learning advanced weapon systems, tactical command, space combat operations. Eventually, you would be assigned to missions against the hegemony. Real combat? Yes. The war is getting worse. We need every talented fighter we can get." Soo-jin thought about the 3 Kuleth students she had fought. That had been self-defense in a bathroom. Real combat would be something else entirely. Fighting trained enemy soldiers who wanted to destroy humanity. Fighting in space, on alien worlds, in conditions she could barely imagine. But she also thought about all the peaceful students at the academy. Students like Kala and Oro who had been bullied until she showed them it was possible to fight back. Students who looked to humans for protection because their own species could not defend them. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Take all the time you need," Captain Dong Hyuk said. "But remember something. You have already proven you can fight when you need to. The question now is whether you want to fight to protect others who cannot protect themselves." That evening, Soo-jin sat in the library where this all began. The same corner table with the view of the gas giant. The same textbooks and notebooks spread out in front of her. But everything else was different. Other students no longer avoided her table. Instead, several approached and asked if they could sit with her while they studied. She had become someone others wanted to be near, someone who made them feel safe. A young Zarin student named Mira sat down across from her. Mira was even more shy than Soo-jin had been. She barely spoke above a whisper and jumped whenever anyone looked at her directly. "Excuse me," Mira said, softly. "Are you really going to become a dragon fighter?" "I have not decided yet," Soo-jin replied. "Why do you ask?" "Because if you do, I wanted to say thank you for showing us that quiet people can be strong too, for proving that being peaceful does not mean being helpless." Other students nodded in agreement. They had all been inspired by her example. Some had started taking self-defense classes. Others had begun standing up to bullies instead of just accepting abuse. Soo-jin realized that her decision would affect more than just herself. She had become a symbol to these students, proof that anyone could be brave when they needed to be. "If I do join the dragon fighters," she said carefully, "it will not be because I like fighting. It will be because sometimes fighting is necessary to protect people who cannot protect themselves." "Like us," Mira whispered. "Like everyone who just wants to live in peace." The next morning, Soo-jin reported to Captain Dong Hyuk's office. She had made her decision. "I want to join the dragon fighters," she said. "But I have one condition." "What is that?" "I want to continue my engineering studies too. I think the dragon fighters need people who understand both combat and technology." Captain Dong Hyuk smiled. "I was hoping you would say that. The future of human warfare is not just about better soldiers. It is about smarter soldiers who can outthink the enemy. So I can do both? We will design a special program for you. Combat training in the mornings, engineering classes in the afternoons. It will be difficult, but I think you can handle it." Over the following months, Soo-jin threw herself into both programs. She learned advanced weapon systems and starship tactics. She studied quantum engineering and exotic matter physics. She became expert at combining her technical knowledge with her growing combat skills. Other dragon fighter candidates started coming to her for help with the technical aspects of their training. She found herself teaching warriors how to understand the equipment they used, how to repair their gear in the field, how to modify their weapons for better performance. She had become a bridge between the military and engineering worlds. The academy instructors began using her as an example in their classes, not just as a fighter, but as proof of what humans could accomplish when they combined intelligence with determination. Students from other species would sometimes ask her why humans were so effective in combat, despite being physically weaker than many alien races. Her answer was always the same. We do not fight with our muscles. We fight with our minds. We analyze the problem, find the weak points, and apply force efficiently. And most importantly, we never give up. Word of her dual training program spread throughout human space. Military academies on other worlds began creating similar programs. The idea of warrior engineers became popular among human forces. But Su Jin remained focused on her own goals. She wanted to complete her training and join the war against the hegemony, not for glory or adventure, but because she understood something important. The galaxy was full of species that preferred peace to war, species that wanted to study and learn and create beautiful things, species that needed protection from those who would hurt them. Humans had become that protection, not because they were naturally violent, but because they were naturally protective. They could not stand to watch innocents suffer when they had the power to help. 1 year after the bathroom incident, Su Jin graduated from both programs. She received her engineering degree with highest honors. She also received her Dragon Fighter commission as a lieutenant. At the graduation ceremony, students from dozens of species filled the auditorium. Many of them had been inspired by her example to push themselves harder in their own studies. Captain Dong Hyuk gave the keynote speech. He talked about courage and determination and the responsibility that came with strength.